All right, team. So again, welcome to the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. let me know, make sure y'all can see my screen okay. But this here again is very important. I am a big person on rules, regulations, and processes. Okay. I feel that they are needed in order to be successful, especially in the logistics industry. But I'm just like I say, I'm big on following the rules and the processes there. And from a carrier standpoint, from a safety standpoint on the highway, when they first came out with the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, as I educated myself on it, I was like, this is a wonderful thing that they came out with. So I put the logo up here of what you all may see if you're involved in this, if you see this around on your screen, if you go to the FMCSA website. And I'm going to be honest up front, I did not come up with anything special because I know people don't read. So I just went to their website and copied the words, and I'm gonna read them to you all on why this is so important. So it made my life easier. But again, it's still, even though it's been around for 3 years, it's still a lot of tweaks and changes that is needed in this Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. So I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying that it works perfect or all that good stuff, because we're going to talk about a little later some things I think they should change in the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. But as far as what it was designed for, the purpose behind it, I fully support it 100%. Do anyone have any questions so far as we get into this presentation? If not, we're going to talk about the agenda. We're going to talk about what is the clearinghouse? Why is it important? Who does it affect? What does it contain? What are the employer's responsibility? And what is the CDL holder responsibility? And then we're going to talk about SAP providers there. And I'm just going to speak to SAP providers and what their purposes and how they help. So just starting off the top, the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse is a secure online database that gives employers, FMCSA, state driver's license agencies, your DMV, state law enforcement personnel, real-time information about the CDL driver drug and alcohol program violations. So again, the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, it is to report violations there. That was the purpose that it was designed. Thereby enhancing safety on our nation's roadways. It's an act of Congress directed by the Secretary of Transportation to establish the clearinghouse. So I did put the link down below where I got this for. This is not some Tarifa SJW logistical mix rule. This is directly on the clearinghouse website. But what I do like about it, it reports the violations. When I first came into the trucking industry, the only thing you had to go by is if that driver was honest. You didn't know if that driver had a violation. You didn't have a way to check unless you did a background check with their employer. And depending on, drivers give bad numbers for employers. Employers go out of business. Some employees will tell you anything just to take that driver off their hand, or to keep from losing that driver. They'll make it where you don't want to hire that driver. So there was a lot of things going on that employers did not have visibility to regarding drivers. So the clearinghouse was designed to give everybody that visibility with, we'll get to this a little later, but I'm going to say it now, with the CDL holder's consent. So you can't get it without consent. So why is it important? I can't say this enough. It's designed to improve highway safety. It is not designed to keep people from driving. I heard drivers say they just don't want us to work. They want to control everything. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's designed to help highway safety. I'll tell you right now, just as it says Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, if a driver has a habit that is not a positive habit, and for instance, alcohol, and they are driving under the influence and they go and crash, that could be your family that's taken away because that driver did not practice safety there. So the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse is designed to prevent that. While it doesn't prevent it 100%, they have seen an increase in safety by having this drug and alcohol clearinghouse because employers have more visibility to see if drivers may have a possible habit and whether you want to take a chance on hiring that driver. So it does make it easier for employers to meet their pre-employment investigation and reporting obligations because, like I say, before the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, it was kind of tough to see if, hey, has this driver ever had something? Then when they start driving for you, be like, something kind of off with his drive. So it makes it more difficult for drivers to conceal their drug and alcohol program violations from current or prospective employers. It provides roadside inspectors and other enforcement personnel with the means to ensure that the drivers receive the required evaluation. So that was the thing. Before the actual Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, and I'll give an example of something that happened to me. So the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse did not come in effect until January 2020. I had a driver that I had hired in August of 2019. That driver went through some, a weigh station or something. They did an inspection on him. When he let down his window, they said they smelled something. So they decided to call an officer to do a search on the truck. He had marijuana in the truck. Again, things like that. I tell people all the time, every class I teach, when I'm onboarding you to get your trucking company, when I'm talking about compliance and safety, I do not care if marijuana is legal in your state. The commercial vehicles are operated by the federal government, not by the state. So it is not legal to smoke weed, do oil, eat your edibles, whatever you want to do. It's not legal in a commercial vehicle. When a driver takes that test and become a CDL holder, you're then at that point responsible and governed by the federal government, not by your state. So that was very, very difficult for me because that was my first time going through that there. And maybe this was something he had done before. I don't know, because we didn't have the clearinghouse there. Then the other thing by the clearinghouse not being in effect when that happened, I wasn't able to report it to warn another employer because that driver will be able to go get his license. He'll be able to keep his license and still drive, but now the next employer may not know that happened to him. So very important to have this as an employer because you want to be successful if you get into the trucking industry. You want to be successful as a driver and as an employer. And then you want to feel safe when you're on the road that the people operating these vehicles are following the law and practicing safety and they're not under the influence of anything. Any questions so far? And I do watch the chat as I'm doing this. So who's responsible for enrolling into the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse from an employer perspective or a driver perspective? So here, interstate and intrastate motor carriers, including passenger carriers. So anybody that operates a commercial vehicle, will they drive interstate, meaning crossing state lines, or intrastate? So just because you stay inside the state don't mean you ain't got to abide by the clearinghouse. You still got to do that. School bus drivers have to enroll into the clearinghouse. Construction equipment operators, a lot of people don't know, but they have that too. It's not just for CDL drivers, it's construction equipment operators. Limousine drivers, municipal vehicle drivers, and federal and other organizations that employ drivers subject to FMCSA drug and alcohol use. So it wasn't, a lot of people think that, but it wasn't just designed for people with CDLs. It's designed to protect anybody that will be operating a commercial piece of equipment or picking up passengers. It's designed to be safe for everyone, not just a particular segment of the highway. And then what does it contain? What's on the inside of a clearinghouse? What do you see in there? So it reports for duty, remain on duty. It's safety sensitive information. So in the clearinghouse, what happens is a driver takes a drug test, or an employee takes a drug test there. And if they fail that drug test, it shows in the clearinghouse when they fail their drug test and what they failed their drug test for. So if it contains the alcohol use, you know, how intoxicated that person was. Was it alcohol use within the 8 hours of an accident or until the post-accident test is completed? So that's another thing there. And I'll tell you, this is really important for employers. When someone goes in and reports something on the clearinghouse for a driver, when someone goes in the clearinghouse and reports something on a driver, they can also tell the events that led up to the negative test, or if a driver, you know, what happened after the not negative, the positive test, and what happened after that. So I have seen in clearinghouses where employers will go in and put the whole entire police report and incident. To me, that was the most helpful thing, because I have investors that lease onto my company, and they go find drivers and they'll tell me, I really want to hire these drivers. I really want to do this. I really want to do that. This driver, so-and-so knows this driver, and this person wants to, they want me to drive for them. You know, they're trying to help somebody out. Well, a lot of times, not a lot of times, sometimes when you're trying to help somebody out, they may have something on their background that you need to know that they will not disclose to you until it comes time to see the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. So it's going to tell any negative violation on your history with the CDL there, and it'll tell you the events. You could be as detailed, if you're an employer, you could be as detailed as you want to be in reporting things on drivers, and you could just go and report that they had a positive test. You know, it's up to you as an employer, but the main thing you're going to be responsible for, which leads into my next slide, is, you know, what is the employer's responsibility? So if you have a trucking company and you're not an owner operator, because the owner operator goes through a different path with the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. Owner operators get put into a consortium where they get sent someone to oversee them taking their random drug tests and different things like that. But if you are an employer or a carrier and you have to enroll into the clearinghouse, the main thing that you need to do is check the clearinghouse before hiring a driver. How that process works, you must have that driver's ID, their driver's license number, and their date of birth and all that. The clearinghouse is going to verify that they're registered. If you're an employer and you get ready to hire somebody that's required to have the clearinghouse and they can't verify that that person is registered, you might not want to hire them there, because it's the law that they get registered. And obviously they've been working jobs where they've been able to avoid getting registered for the clearinghouse. So that might be a red flag right there. The next thing is, if you have a violation, you are responsible for reporting that within 3 days of the violation occurring. So some people think that some drivers think that the drug testing facility is going to report it, or some employers think, well, the drug testing facility will report it. The employer is responsible for reporting it too. The drug testing facility will report it, but the employer is responsible for reporting it as well. And you're responsible for reporting it within 3 days of the violation occurring. Now, I told you all in the beginning, there are some things that needs to be improved, or they still have a work in progress, because while this program is about 3 years old, it's still kind of new. They do not have an audit process to know if you reported it within 3 days or not. I'm sure somewhere down the line they'll get there, where they'll be able to check for drivers that had violations currently employed and the employer didn't report it. they just terminated them and let them go. So they'll eventually get that, but it is still the employer's responsibility to report. If you have a driver that has a violation, remove them from operating that commercial vehicle. I've seen people there, and I can admit I'm guilty of it myself, but y'all didn't hear me say that. But I've seen people that have drivers who they've given a random, and that driver fails the random. You're not supposed to let that driver move in that vehicle until those results come back. But in my younger years of SJW, before the clearinghouse came out, yes, I would give randoms and just assume the naiveness in me would assume that the driver's gonna pass that test, and I have them rolling, and I had a driver get in another state, and I got notified, hey, that driver failed a drug test. Well, legally, he should not have drove that truck back home and parked it. I should have had someone go get the truck and the driver and bring them back to the yard. So just want you all to know, if you give a driver a random drug test and they fail, they are to stop operating that vehicle immediately. If you hire a driver that has a violation and they have not completed their return to duty testing or process, you as the employer, you're responsible for completing that return to duty drug test. A lot of people will set the drug test up as a pre-employment drug test. That's no. There's a section when setting up a drug test, especially if you use Quest Diagnostics, that says return to duty drug testing. That drug test, if you get audited by FMCSA, that drug test has to say return to duty. That drug test has to be observed, meaning someone has to watch that driver take his drug test to ensure that they're not trying to, get over on the drug test today. So that is very, very, very important as an employer, that you complete a return to duty drug test. The next thing, once you get those results, if you're going to hire a driver that has had a violation and need a return to duty drug test, you are responsible for putting in the negative results into the clearinghouse there. You are responsible for that. Now, on the clearinghouse website, because I'm a reader, the clearinghouse website also says that the employer has to put it in within 3 days. That is an error. You do not have to put in those negative results within 3 days. I've seen people put in negative results on a return to duty a year later there, because this is still new to the clearinghouse. They have a lot of things, like I told y'all, that they need to fix. But I have hired on drivers who have completed return to duty drug testing. They went through the program, but they've been operating a commercial vehicle with their licenses still being prohibited. So anytime that a driver has a violation on the clearinghouse, it's going to prohibit their license from being active. So I've seen employers go in, they're like, oh, I did all the work. They'll go in and put that return to duty in a year later, and it'll clear them right away. So the clearinghouse stance on it is, yeah, we have it in there 3 days, but it really does not matter when you put it in. And as an employer, we think that you would want to put it in right away. So they don't realize that people don't understand that they're responsible for putting it in, because a lot of times people think the drug testing facility is going to go in and put it in the clearinghouse. That is not true. The employer is responsible for putting it in the clearinghouse. Any questions about that? I see a question in the chat says, does a broker has to check the clearinghouse before onboarding new carriers? No. That is, if you're talking about a freight broker, the answer is no. A freight broker has nothing to do with the clearinghouse per se, as in hiring drivers. No problem, Ms. Everett. And then you must complete a follow-up plan. So Just because they go take a return to duty drug test and they have a negative result and they're eligible to, that means they can start back driving a commercial vehicle or operating a commercial equipment. That does not mean it's all over and clear. You have to do a follow-up drug testing plan. You have to give that driver about 6 random tests after they fail a drug test. And when I say random, that means random. You can't tell them, hey, I'm gonna test you every 30 days on the 15th of every month. That's not random. That's not random, because if they do have a problem, you're giving them a chance to get themselves together. It's very common in this industry that people give people a heads up, but that's not a random. A random is when you tell that driver, hey, I need you to take a drug test without them knowing, and you go ahead and send them the paperwork and they take that drug test. If that driver refuses a drug test, the employer is responsible for putting that in the clearinghouse. You're responsible for putting in that the driver refused a drug test. Now, again, I told y'all there's some things that I said a little shaky with the clearinghouse. One of the things that I've noticed employers are doing, which is not fair to drivers, is that they're telling the driver they're going to hire them. Then drivers, of course, they're looking for multiple people to work for. So they're trying to get hired on with whoever can hire them first, whoever has the best pay rate or something like that. Employers schedule a drug test and give it to a driver. And then that driver never calls back and say, you know what? I decided to go with someone else. I'm not going to go take your drug test because I'm going to go get hired by someone else. Well, that employer gets upset. They go in the clearinghouse and say that driver refused the drug test. Okay, that's wrong. And I'm going to tell you what happens to that driver when that happens. But as an employer, if you issue out a drug test and that driver does not respond and they don't go take the drug test, you never hired them. They never told you they were coming to work for you. They didn't sign an employment agreement, a letter. Did they sign your offer letter or anything like that? So you can't technically say they refused the drug test. But some companies, especially these newer companies coming in, they're getting upset because they want drivers really bad, and they're using the clearinghouse to a negative advantage to hurt drivers. That's not fair. Because what happened is when you go in and put that a driver refused the drug test, which is very common in what employers are doing, they have to go through the SAP program, substance abuse program. They have to go through that. So when you sat there and said they refused that drug test because they didn't want to come work for you, you're getting their CDLs demoted where they can't work, and then they're having to go find an SAP professional to be able to go through the program and pay them some money. And some SAP professionals charge anywhere from $300 to $5,000 that you may be costing that driver when you do that. When you're, as I call it, when you're in your feelings, you may be costing that driver, and then they have to go to that process before they can get their license back, all because you put that they refuse a drug test. So one thing I would say, if you're an employer, you may get upset because you really wanted that driver or that worker, but don't abuse the system. Don't abuse the system, because all it's going to do is cause FMCSA, once the driver association get together and prove that people are abusing the system, it's going to cause them to put another rule in place. So I see another question say, does it cost to set up a test for your driver in the clearinghouse? Okay, so in the clearinghouse, it does cost to run a check on that driver. It does cost, I think, anywhere from $1.25 or $1.50. Ms. Karen says it's $1.25 per driver, but I know if you buy them in bulk, like 100 or 200, it gets cheaper as you buy them, but it's not expensive. And it's one thing I advise all employers to do before they even send them to take a drug test. Because if you send them to take a drug test, or whatever. You want to make sure their CDLs are not prohibited, because you don't want to have them go back to take a return to duty because you missed that. So always do that process first. And it's cheaper. Any other questions so far? If you're a subcontracting work, how does that work? I'm not sure what you mean by subcontracting work. I need a little bit more information on that one. Are there any other questions for me? Now we're gonna go on to the next slide. I'm gonna talk about the CDL holders. That's the one that I'm gonna focus on because that's the one that I'm most familiar with. So if you are a CDL driver and or holder, your responsibility in the clearinghouse is to view your own record. Know your profile. Know your profile. If you put a subcontract on your job and they get into an accident, who has to deal with the drug test? So that's something totally separate from the clearinghouse. There, as far as what your rules would be, whether you're a subcontractor or a contractor, that should be in your hiring policy on what the rules are for the drug test. I can't answer that question on that part, because that's something that if you're the subcontractor, that's something that the contractor would have in their rules and regulations and safety things. Somebody should have those rules documented somewhere on what happens in the accident and who will be doing the drug test. That's not a question I can answer. I'm sorry. Brittany asks, how do you request consent from the carrier? Will you need to sign a document to be able to view? Yes. So we're going to get to that next. But that's actually the next thing on the screen. Provide consent to current or prospective employers to access details about any drug and alcohol violations. So how it works is, when the employer takes their driver's license information and enter it into the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, it's going to send that driver an email saying, SJW is requesting consent to view your Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse profile. That driver has to log in and approve consent. That is how that works. Once they approve it, you will be able to go in and review their profile. The next thing is, as an employer, once you hire that driver, there is a template on the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse website where you could do a limited query that you're responsible for doing every year on that driver. Once you do the initial one, you could and you can get them to sign a consent that allows you to do it for 3 years. So once they sign it at one time, you're good to go for 3 years, and then they have to re-sign it for every 3 years. And Ms. Karen said that's why the driver should be registered. Correct. If they're not registered again, it's been around for about 3 years now. So that driver is not registered. They don't have their license longer than 3 years. I don't know if you want to take that risk with that driver if you can't see if their CDLs are active or not. Because the thing that a lot of people don't know is that they have not directly tied the clearinghouse in with the commercial DMV, Driver's Motor Vehicle Department. So a driver's CDL can be prohibited, but when they get stopped and run their license, unless it's a DOT officer, they won't be able to see that driver's license is prohibited. So they have not got that far in technology yet to know that. So depending on what officer stops you will depend on the outcome in hiring a driver whose license is prohibited. Yes, Brittany, you can request them to sign up as a contingency to hire. It would be required. I wouldn't request them. If you want to really hire them, I would require it, because you're protecting your company. You're looking out for your company as well. A driver that gets stopped and their licenses are prohibited, that fine is going to go to your company as well as the driver. It's going to go to your company. So you're looking out for you. Then if a driver has going back to the presentation, if a driver has a violation on their drug and alcohol clearinghouse, it's going to say driver is not eligible to operate a commercial vehicle. You will see that once you get consent, but the driver don't have to give anybody consent to see that themselves. That's why I say view your record, know your profile, know what's up there. I can't tell you how many drivers call and tell me, I didn't know I had a violation. I didn't know I had this. I didn't know I had that. They did the annual consent and just fired me saying I had a violation. Know your profile. If you're a driver, know your profile. Know what's on there, because you could be operating a commercial vehicle. You've gotten a letter or something. Can a driver dispute their profile? Brittany, that's another thing why I said they still got a long way to go. Because those drivers who get caught up in those situations where employers report that they refuse to a drug test because they decided not to work with them, I feel those drivers should be able to dispute that, but they're not right now. So they still got to work on that as well. But they can go to the employer that put it up there and ask them to remove it. But I've seen a lot of drivers not having much luck with that as well. So it says select a substance abuse professional. So yes, a substance abuse professional is for when they are responsible for ensuring you understand your violation. So I have seen several people with, like, since this came out, I've seen all kinds of violations from marijuana to cocaine to alcohol, heroin. I've seen it all. They're on there with the violations. The substance abuse professional, they are responsible for helping them understand their violation, why it's illegal, and they are also responsible for helping that CDL holder put together a plan to prevent it from happening again. Because again, at this point, when you're failing drug tests, you're not only putting your life at risk, but you're putting the people around you when operating that commercial equipment. You're putting their lives at risk too, because you're not completely in your right mind. So they are also responsible for making you eligible to return to duty. So I've seen drivers think that once they get a violation reported by the employer, they could just call that employer and say, hey, can you give me another drug test? And I did this because they're trying to avoid the substance abuse professional. No, unless you go through that particular program with a substance abuse professional, that employer cannot go in the system unless they are a certified substance abuse professional, which they can be if they meet the qualification to go through the program. They cannot go in and make you eligible to return to duty. There's no way around it. FMCSA has said if you get any violation, whether it's true or not, if you get any violation on your clearinghouse, you have to meet with a substance abuse professional and you have to go through the program, and that mark stays on your clearinghouse. If I made a mistake, for either 3 years or 5 years, but it stays on your record. So it does not go away. Any questions about that? If not, I'm going to tell y'all a story of something that I went through in the clearinghouse, and I want to know what decision you all would have made, because again, the clearinghouse is designed to help you make decisions on hiring the best driver or employee for your team. So I met this driver about 2 years ago, And he had got released from his company. He didn't know he had some on his clearinghouse. While he was working for his company, he went and took a drug test. And the company that he went and took the drug test for never called him back. The driver did not follow up why that company had called him back or anything like that. He just assumed that they decided they would go with somebody else. So he kept working for his company. He was already employed. It didn't make a big difference in his life. Well, the company that he was working for ran the annual query that they're supposed to do, and they saw that he had failed the drug test. So they released him immediately because it was reported that he had failed the drug test. Well, the employer didn't report it. The drug testing facility reported it. But he claims he never got a notice from the drug testing facility that he failed the drug test. Well, the unique thing about it was he stated that he had went to the dentist office that day, and the dentist office had numbed him and did a lot of dental work. And being that he was off, he went and took a drug test for the other company while he was off, and he tested positive for cocaine because there's a substance in this numbing medication that will make you test positive for cocaine. If you all would have heard that story, because it was on his clearinghouse, he tested positive for cocaine. If you all would have heard that story, would you all have hired that driver, or would you all have moved on? What would you have done? If y'all at work and you can't talk, you can put it in the chat. But I'm telling you this scenario because as an employer, these are the type of stories you will hear sometimes. Could that driver have been telling the truth? Could it, I had never heard that before in my life. There, I was like, oh, the stuff they numb you with at the dentist office has cocaine in it? Then I thought about it, me and my mind started wondering, oh, you know what? When you do see them on the movies and they testing cocaine with their tongue, they say it numbs their tongue. So it does numb it, huh? My mind starts wondering, right? So I see some people saying move on, and all that good stuff. So what I did, because he sounded like a really good driver, I got a big heart. So what I did, he sent me the dental paperwork. It matched the date that he took the test. I contacted a doctor because I know some doctors and nurses and stuff, and some pharmacists. So I contacted some people. They did tell me, yes, that is a real possibility, but he must have went right after he got out of the dentist office because that stuff wear off in a couple of hours. And if he would have waited a couple of hours and waited till the next day, he wouldn't have tested positive there. So that led me to believe that this young man was telling the truth. But did y'all catch what I just said? I did my research. I asked you all, what would you do? Would you just not give him a chance, or would you do your research? I did my research because there are all kinds of scenarios out there. Drivers are not that easy to come by, but I don't want to hire a driver that has a possible issue going on there at the same time. But I do want to give a good driver a chance that's been caught in a bad situation, because as I've told you all, the clearinghouse got a lot of work to do. So anytime something is new, there's some tweaks that need to be made. There's some things that need to happen. Now, what I felt should have happened is when the facility that tested him, when they actually saw this show up, those professionals, since they are doctors that sign off on it, they should have contacted that driver and said, did you take any medication? Because I do know when people test positive for certain levels of marijuana, they will call them and ask them, do they have a prescription for it? And that does make a difference on their drug test. So that's what I feel the facility should have did. And maybe they did call and he ignored the call, but either way, they reported it. I did my research. I found out that you can test positive for cocaine after going to the dentist and getting your work done and getting all numbed up. So I gave the driver a chance. He ended up being one of the best drivers that I have 2 years later. So I am saying all this to say another reason why I had this webinar is to say, yes, it gives you visibility, but you still got to use your own judgment to trust what's in the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. You still have to use your own judgment to determine whether you want to hire that driver. Someone said he a good driver with good teeth. Now, I don't know. I ain't get that close to him to see if it, But yes, do your research because there's still a lot of tweaks that needs to be made in there. Now, if a driver, if he would not have told me that story about the dental work, you're right, I would have moved on. I would not have hired him because I've studied enough about the different drugs out there and how long they take to clear your system and the different things you could do to pass the drug test. And I just don't want to put my company at that kind of risk, worrying about if that driver has an addiction or if they have something going on and if they're going to put other people at risk, including my company. So, Ms. Karen, did you raise your hand? You have a question?
Well, I just wanted to share a little something kind of sort of similar. There was once I had to release a manager, and he was a good manager. He was a good employee. But we had to send him, he had to go on a random. And when his results came back, of course, it came back with substances. And he had taken some medication that was prescribed for his wife. He had been on the job for 15, 16 years. 15, 16 years, manager, good CDL driver and all that. And he had to be released because when this random came up, he had taken some cold medications. And he tested positive for drugs. So that's just something I wanted to kind of throw out there for you guys to also, whenever you're hiring your drivers or anything, that might just be something that you want to make sure that you mention to them. Don't take nobody else's prescribed medication.
That's a real good one. And guys, if y'all don't know Ms. Karen, she's a compliance manager. She does compliance for trucking companies there. But that's a good one because I've had that scenario too. One hire driver, and he said that on his clearinghouse, it was going to show some violations because he took his wife's medicine. I can't tell y'all how many times I've heard they got violations for taking their wife's medicine because that prescription didn't belong to them. I don't care who prescription is, how much pain you're in. If you know you taking that prescription and you know that that's going to, don't go take that drug test. And if you got that random, you better start talking real quick. It might not save you. You might still lose your job, but you better start talking real quick there. And I don't know if people just wait to see if they can get away with it. Maybe they got that little bit of faith or hope that it's going to come back negative or whatever, but it does not. And I had the same thing. This particular driver told me that he took his wife's medicine, so he tested positive for some drugs there and all that kind of stuff. But he done went through the SAP program and he's ready to return to duty. Well, again, he didn't go check his clearinghouse before he gave me consent. He told me that story, and I went and checked his clearinghouse, and he had failed 2 drug tests for cocaine. He had been in an accident and fled the scene of an accident, and the employer went and listed all that out. So that's one time I didn't take the driver's word and do no research because it was enough information in there for me to make a decision that he would not be a person that I would want to work with because he appears to have more than what he says going on. It's more than his wife's medication. So with all that being said, the clearinghouse, it was designed not to hurt people, but to help them, to bring visibility to issues out there, as well to help employers make informed decisions. But it probably, I don't know if it's true, but I'm assuming it probably has helped save a lot of drivers too from, getting into accidents and things like that. But I've seen drivers who go through it because they decided they will go on vacation and, you know, have a good time and come back, and then they get hit with a random. And they realize, like, you know what, I couldn't work for 30 or 60 days. That really hurt my family. I'll never make that mistake again. So, you know, I think it does help the ones that learn from it as well, but it's all designed to be safe for everyone, including the drivers. We don't want to let people operate commercial vehicles on the road and then something bad happens. We lose a family member, they lose their own life, and it's just not worth it. So I really, those are the reasons that I do really like the clearinghouse, even though I've told y'all all the reasons that they need, all the things they need to tweak in it and make better there, but it's a work in progress. So we are at the end of the presentation. I have about 9 minutes left for questions. What's in the clearinghouse that shows that they need an SAP professional? Brittany, whenever that driver logs in and they see that they are prohibited from operating a commercial vehicle, it will say it bright, loud, clear. They read it, it will say they are prohibited. They should not be operating. So it will definitely tell them. They know. If they're registered, they know. You may not know. They might see what they can get away with without going to an SAP professional and paying that kind of money, but they know. Do we have any questions? No problem, Brittany. I hope this was helpful and learning about the clearinghouse, learning about my experiences, things I've heard, why it's important. It's not designed to hurt anybody, it's designed to help everyone there, but there are some things that are being abused on both ends with the clearinghouse there, but everything's online. Go read it. You can call FMCSA. You can get a copy of this webinar on YouTube there and go watch it as many times as you would like. It will be put on YouTube within 24 hours. Are there any other questions?
Ms. Aretha?
Yes.
How can they find SBA professionals?
That's a great question. To find an SAP professional, I'm not sure, but when they log in, they see they're violated. There's a link that can show them a list of SAP providers in their area. They can go on FMCSA website and look up SAP professionals. There's a way you can put in your zip code or to find some that are near you. You can go to, we'll put the link, Brittany, to the FMCSA clearinghouse where you can go sign up for it.
Should that be something I should be looking to add to my repertoire?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. The companies have not signed up for the clearinghouse and they are operating commercial vehicles there. That is part of compliance. You need to do a clearinghouse check. Do I have any other questions before we end this webinar? I cannot in this session explain owner operators using a consortium versus clearinghouse, but just because they're in a consortium does not excuse them from using the clearinghouse. They still have to go in the clearinghouse. They still have to have a profile. A consortium just sends them a random drug test to take and make sure they're doing the drug test and following the rules of FMCSA. That's what a consortium is designed for. Is there, just look at a consortium as independent people managers. So just because a person is independent, they still have to be governed on the safety side. And we don't want to trust, not saying they'll lie, but we can't trust the person to give them own selves random. They ain't gonna wake up and say, hey, I'm gonna give myself a random today. So that's what the consortium is designed for, is to give them a random. and to make sure they follow the safety rules and all that good stuff. So, I still ended up explaining it high level. But other than that, I thank you guys for our time, and I want to just share with you in these last 5 minutes that SJW will be turning 6 in April. We are so excited about that. So my goal is to educate. Let me show y'all our banner. LaTanya has worked really hard on that. We have our site posted for the road to 6. So April is closer than I thought it was, because we already in February. I was thinking I still had 3 or 4 more months. But one thing that we're going to be doing is hosting workshops. So we're going to do 6 workshops at $60 for 60 minutes. LaTanya will have to put the link in there for you all to see what the different workshops will be on. But in those 60 minutes, it'll be similar to our webinars. I'll be educating you, I'll answer questions, tell you how to get there. It will be the most valuable $60 you could spend, because I will give you everything that you need in those workshops. I think one of them is how to get started in this trucking world. For those that want to get into containers and drayage, we have a workshop on containers and drayage. For those that want to get into warehousing, we have a workshop on warehousing. For those that need to know how to hire owner operators and expand their authority, or hire drivers, we have a workshop on that. So we have tons of workshops, not tons, 6 workshops coming out in the month of February. So for $60, that will teach you different things in the logistics and trucking industry there. And we will have a host of more webinars coming up as we lead to our road to 6, where we'll be sharing even more information there with different webinars. So I, again, thank you all for joining our webinar on the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. It has been a pleasure, as always, to share my knowledge and information and different things that you will go through in this logistics industry here. And like I say, the drug and alcohol is very important. It's designed to help everyone be successful. It's not designed to hurt anyone, and it's designed to protect all of our safety while we're out here on the highways or riding by buildings where people are operating cranes. So again, I thank you all. And as I always say, as I end this webinar, I want everyone to bet on yourself in 2023 and see what you come up with. All right?
Yes.
You all have a good one.
You too. I'm sorry, Siri, I have a question really quickly about the classes.
Mhm.
I think too that I wanted to do, but I was reading, if I just pick them a la carte, will I be able to come to the lab, or I'll just get a viewing of it?
So that's a great question. The classes will be live on the dates that they're set, but if you miss the lives, you'll still have 60 days access to go back and view it.
Oh, okay. Yep. All right. I'm signing up. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Again, you all have a great rest of your day. Bet on you in 2023, okay?